All right, let's go ahead and start our next lesson. We're talking about lesson 571, and today we are subtracting algebraic expressions from each other. And what's significant about this is we have a minus sign in between parentheses, which means basically we're going to have to distribute a -1 or change the sign for everything after the minus sign in the parentheses. So go ahead and pause the video now, copy the problem down. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is a rule for subtraction. And if you guys had, let's say, 2 minus 4, so we can do add the opposite, right? And a -4 is the same as -1 times 4, correct? Which means that if I were to work backwards here, 2 minus 4 is like having a -1 right next to something. So if you have a minus sign in front of parentheses, that's just like distributing a -1 after you do rule for subtraction. So there's our first step. Second step, pause the video if you need to. Second step, we're going to distribute the -1. So notice that I copied all the information down that I'm not using. And we want to do that in our math classes, right? We do one step at a time, but we copy all the other stuff we're not doing yet. So I copy all this stuff because I'm not doing it yet. Because remember, simplifying means distribute first and then combine like terms. That's how we simplify, correct? So I'm going to distribute first. I have -1 times 2x, which is -2x, and -1 times 2, which is -2. So we distributed first, distributive property. After we distribute, we combine like terms. Now notice that these big parentheses went away, right? I still don't have big parentheses around this whole thing. Once I distributed, those left. And the only reason I keep these parentheses here is because there's nothing in front to distribute. So I really don't even need those. I don't have to write them if I don't want to. Now I would still want to use these parentheses here because we separate addition and subtraction sign with parentheses, correct? So now that we distributed, we combine like terms. We add x's to x's and constants to constants using teams to get our answer. Combine like terms. So pause the video if you need to. Get caught up with your notes there. As soon as you're ready, pause the video now and try this problem on your own. So we have 7x plus 7 minus this whole expression, x plus 2. And that is different than this. This is not the same. Don't write this part down that I'm writing right now. That's not the same as minus 2x plus 2. You see, this is not the same as this. These are different. Because of these parentheses, we're going to have to subtract the 2 also, whereas in this problem here, we're not doing that. So notice the difference between those two problems. The minus sign in parentheses means distribute a negative. That's the skill we're learning today. And let's go ahead and use an old skill, which is the rule for subtraction first. Will help us with our subtracting and our distributing. Add the opposite. So there's a minus in front, which is actually a -1 in front. So I'm going to distribute. So let me write it a little more legibly here for you guys. I'm going to distribute that -1. Remember, don't do anything to the first part, but write it down, right? We write down the stuff we're not using. We don't forget about it because that's how we get problems wrong. So we're going to copy the stuff down that we're not doing. We're going to do one step, and that step is to distribute this -1. Notice that I didn't have to do rule for subtraction here because it's not a subtraction problem, nor is it here. So I'm going to copy the stuff down that I'm not using yet. Can't forget about it. Distribute here. -1 times x is -x, or -1x, right? -x is -1x simplified. -1 times +2 is -2. So I can put a plus sign in the middle of everything. I can always put a plus sign in the middle of everything if I always use rule for subtraction. So I distribute it, now I combine like terms. I add x's to x's. Those are opposite teams, so I subtract. Positives have more. Same thing for the constants. And we get our answer, 6x plus 5. I want you guys to go ahead and do the next problem. So again, we're subtracting algebraic expressions, and these are called binomials because there's 1, 2, bi means 2, 1, 2 terms in there. So my minus means I'm going to go add the opposite, draw 2 sticks, but it's actually -1. And I have to do that because there's parentheses next to it. Now look inside. I'm going to do the rule for subtraction again. Watch, I'm going to do it right here again. I'm going to go add the opposite. Now, we do use parentheses to separate the plus and the minus signs, but we also have to alternate. You guys remember what I'm about to say here? We also have to alternate from parentheses to brackets when what? It's when we have parentheses inside parentheses. It starts to look a little dizzying when you look at that. So what we do in math is another way to write a parenthesis is to use a bracket. So if you put parentheses in parentheses, this parenthesis right here becomes a bracket. You can keep the parenthesis in the inside as is. So we'll go ahead and keep this one. Sorry, I'm trying to get my cursor in the right spot so I can get my head on the right spot on this tablet here. So now we can distribute. All right, so we have 7x plus 7 plus, remember we did rule for subtraction, so we put a plus sign in the middle of everything. -1 times x is -x. Plus -1 times -2 is +2. Combine like terms. After we distribute, we combine like terms. I get 6x plus 9, and that is this expression simplified. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Pause the video now and try to do this one on your own. So let's see how you guys did. I see a subtraction sign, and after the subtraction sign, I see parentheses. So I'll draw 2 sticks, add the opposite, but that minus sign is a -1. And inside these parentheses here, I don't have to do rule for subtraction just because of that minus sign. I can have a negative number. That doesn't matter. But what does matter is I can't have a subtraction problem. So if I don't have a plus sign in the middle, I have to draw 2 sticks. I have to do the rule for subtraction. But if I do have a plus sign in the middle, then I don't have to, even if one of them is negative already, right? So I'm going to draw 2 sticks. I'm going to go add the opposite. But now I have parentheses in parentheses. So the way I should have written this, instead of making more work for myself the first time I wrote it, I should have put parentheses out on the outside, knowing that I was going to put parentheses on the inside also, because we alternate parentheses, brackets. So hopefully you guys will skip this step in the future. I just wrote it out just for the sake of teaching. So we're going to go ahead and distribute and combine like terms. Distribute first. Do not forget to copy down the information that you're not using yet. The -1 is getting multiplied into the -x, so the -1 is in there. It's already in that x. These two together make that x, so it's there. This -1 is going to get multiplied to that, so I get 2. Combine my like terms and box your answer. And that's how you would simplify this expression. So if we had to solve an equation, a multi-step equation, which you will, and let's say I put equals 8x minus 4, and we had to solve for x, this nasty looking equation. First thing you do is you would simplify this side, and this is exactly how you do it. You simplify, distribute, combine like terms. That's all you would do. And then we'll teach you what you do after that in 8th grade. Okay? So let's go ahead and see if you can answer this word problem. Pause the video now and try this on your own. So we have to be careful here when we write this because let me show you an easier example. Let's say I had 1 minus 2. That is not the same as 2 minus 1. So subtraction is what we call, it's not what we call commutative. That means I can't just switch them, right? If it's addition, 1 plus 2, well, that's the same as 2 plus 1. Addition and multiplication are commutative, but subtraction is not. So long story short, I have to be careful which one I write first, because if I put the wrong one first, it's the wrong answer. So let's read it. What would you have to subtract from this to get this? Oh my goodness, you know what? They actually gave us the difference. So we had this first. We have to write this first. And it says, what would you subtract from this? So we're going to subtract something from this. To get the difference means the answer of a subtraction problem, 2x minus 9. So something goes here. I have to subtract this to get this. That looks really complicated, doesn't it? Well, just like I did earlier, let's just use easier numbers. Let's say this was 10. What would I subtract from 10 in order to get, let's say, 2? Well, that's pretty simple. I would take away 8 from 10 to get 2, right? How did I do that? Well, I subtracted these two to get what's missing. So I'll do the same thing up here. I'll take these two and subtract, write that first and subtract this one, because that's what I did for the easier problem. I took the first one from the problem and I subtracted the answer, the difference, to get what's missing. So that's how we'll do this problem. We took easier numbers and figured out how to do it. So I'll take the first one and subtract the second expression to get my answer. I'm going to do the rule for subtraction here. Now that I've done this a few times, I know that this is going to be plus -1. And I see a negative subtraction sign in there, so I know I'm going to switch to brackets and put parentheses inside. And these are parentheses. That's a bracket there. Now I can distribute before I combine like terms, and that will be simplified. So I have x plus 5. I'm copying the stuff that I'm not using yet. Plus, I'm going to do -1 times 2x, and that -1 is now in this one expression that I'm writing. And -1 times 9 is 9, because negative times negative is positive. Combine like terms. These are opposite teams, so I subtract. Negatives have more. -1x is the answer, but -1x can be simplified to just -x. I have 5 more constants and 9 more constants. I have a total of 14 constants, and our answer is -x plus 14. Now that would be the same as 14 minus x, but this is what we call descending order. That means you put your numbers before your letters. All right, that looks like that's it for today's lesson. We will see you guys soon.